The Dallas Cowboys had a rough outing against the Rams in week 1 of the preseason. We'll tell you if that changes our expectations for the team next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we're going to talk about some positional groups that are trending in the right direction, some that we're a little bit concerned about coming out of the preseason. But let's start with this, Landon. We've had one preseason game. We've had about 3 weeks of practice now. Have your expectations changed at all regarding the Cowboys based on what you've seen?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that if my expectations for the team overall have changed, but it does feel like there has been some calibrating, and I guess that's probably to be expected once we come in here and we actually get to see these guys out in the field and see where these different position groups are. I think there isn't like a bunch of huge shifts going one way or the other, but there are like several different smaller shifts which all kind of counterbalance each other out a little bit. I guess the biggest one for me is that I definitely think that, they may try to be a more efficient running team, but this is still very much a passing football team based on what I've seen in camp, and that's going to be their bread and butter. And despite what they, maybe saying, and not that running the ball won't be more important or more efficient and they aren't focusing on it. But I think if we're talking in the grand scheme of things, how this team wins football games, I think they're going to win football games by Dak Prescott throwing the football to CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens.
So I think the Cowboys, just in general, are still going to be a borderline playoff team this year. I just have a hard time assuming that they're relatively healthy, thinking they're not going to be in the playoff hunt, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the floor might be lower with this team than we've seen in other years because I just don't see. And again, you tell me if you feel differently. I don't see the depth in the middle of their roster that they've had over the last couple of years. There are some spots that have it, but there are a couple spots that just make me feel a little queasy. And maybe that's because of a couple of drafts where you didn't get, elite players and you're getting guys that are backups rather than starters. But it feels like the ceiling can still be pretty high, but the floor does feel lower.
I don't know. I mean, I think the floor I think the floor feels lower because of a lot of the kind of temporary injury situations that are currently going on. Like, I feel like if we had, if we took all things as equal and we had a healthy version of this roster versus a healthy version of the last, 3 or 4 rosters, I think it probably lines up in some ways.
But it's not. Yeah, I agree with you. But also, when you have guys that are already hurt going into the season,
that's fair.
It kind of makes that the case, though.
It's fair. I mean, I do think that they have an abnormal amount of guys that are coming back from injury that are like trying to race against the clock to get in for like the early part of the season. And I think that that's different than like guys that are injured in training camp. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that are going into the season, getting injured. Right. I think it's probably, around the same level of talent. I just think that right now availability is a real issue, especially when you're thinking about week 1 in some key spots. Because look, I do think, think about some of the key spots that they have really great depth. Like, they've obviously got really great depth at the interior offensive line that they haven't had in a very long time. They obviously have a lot of numbers at pass rusher, even with Micah Parsons out. I think at the spots where they need numbers, they have it, but I think some of those numbers right now, especially at key positions like cornerback, are being kind of obfuscated by the fact that some of these players aren't all the way back from injuries yet.
And that's fair. But man, I guess I'm looking at the defense, and I know Micah Parsons out. So you have to try to think about what it's going to look like when Micah Parsons is back, assuming that he is. I'm still of the belief that he's going to get a deal done. I do have some concerns. And listen, we talked about this a couple months ago. I said if we got to August 1st and he wasn't practicing, then I would be getting concerned about how ready he's going to be for the regular season. It sounds like he's doing everything behind the scenes to get ready. But even what we saw last year with CeeDee Lamb, like it takes you a couple weeks to get into the flow of things. So, we're halfway through August just about, right? And he has not practiced with the team. On top of Micah being out, your best corner, Trevon Diggs, is out. Your best linebacker, DeMarvion Overshown, is out. It's just really hard when your top three guys aren't in camp right now.
Yeah, that's fair, right? But I also think that what we're watching is the starters are our middle class right now. So like when the stars come back, then suddenly these guys who are we're worrying about the middle class, they become the middle class. So, but to your point, absolutely. Like I do think that it's tough with all those guys. I would say that the difference between this year and last year, like what we dealt with, is that when CD came back, not only did CD have to like get back into the sync of things while missing training camp, he also had to be the outrageous sole member of the passing receiving team, right? Like, I mean, he was carrying that whole side of the ball basically by himself. And Micah Parsons is definitely not going to have to do that. Like, that's the thing, is that the difference there is that instead of wide receiver being a weakness like it was last year without CeeDee Lamb, pass rusher is a strength of this team, even without Micah Parsons. You want Micah Parsons. It takes it to a new level. You shouldn't get rid of Micah Parsons, but the Cowboys are much better supported to handle those losses this year than they were in previous years. So I think there's just a little bit of give and take, and things have shifted around a little bit. But I guess my point is that I actually like where they've shifted the depth of this team, because I think it's the places that you need to be you have valuable depth. Cornerback is kind of in transition because of injury, but they have bodies at cornerback, right? Like if Trevon Diggs comes back healthy, suddenly you've got now 3 and 4 deep of guys who have experience playing on the field. So it's just different. I think that the talent has shifted around. I don't know that it's any better or worse necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think going back to last year. Like, I feel better about the running back situation than I felt last year about the running back situation. Partly because first
the
of all,
known there was bad, right? Like, yeah,
well,
it's like you knew that it was bad. It's like it's still the chance that it could be a boat in that box with the Cowboys running game at this point, right?
I felt yes, I felt like there was a chance that Rico Dowdle was going to be the starter and was going to get lots of work, but my fear which is what happened the first 6 weeks of the season happened, right? At least with this group, I feel like there's some fungibility. I don't know. That's a word I'm going to try to use. You have some guys that, hey, if Javante's not running well, you can use Phil Moffitt. If it's not Phil Moffitt, maybe it's Jaden Blue. And if it's not Jaden Blue, it's Miles Sanders. I think they have more answers, and I don't think they're locked into any one player like they were at times last year.
Yeah, and I think that's what I'm talking about, right? Is that like, yeah, there's some unknowns at key spots, but I'd rather be like have some unknown and uncertainty that we can solve than the certainty of what we had last year at some of these spots. And again, I think if you're going to have bodies at a position, have it at a position that's going to play, like defensive end, right? Like, so you can rotate those guys in. I think that there's a couple different spots where they've added bodies at a higher rate than we even expected, that players that showed up at camp better than we expected and added reinforcements to depth that we didn't know that we had.
All right, let's talk about some positions that are trending in the right direction. We'll call these guys stock up. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of the year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, Landon and I are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. And to celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. And to kick it off, they've dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's only one team left standing. And with the new season right around the corner, now is the time to get your league mates together and give this mode a try. And if you're into the classics, you can still go do that. Go play in a private league or join a public head-to-head league. So stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/lockedon. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Landon, let's talk about some positional groups that we are feeling better about now than we did even going into training camp. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I've kind of hinted at it several different times, but I think the edge position is where we kind of start because here's the thing. We actually talked about this position being a sneaky depth spot, right? We said if a couple of these guys can hit, if one of these guys can hit, suddenly you're 2 or 3 deep at defensive end, and you're feeling really good. Well, I mean, so far from what we've seen, it seems like all these guys look good, right? Like, I mean, Sam Williams has flashed at certain points. Marshawn Nealon looks like a strong player on the edge as in the run game. Dante Fowler looks still like Dante Fowler that we remembered when he left. And I think that the stock up, the thing that's been the real, I don't know if I want to call it, it's probably the ceiling raiser, maybe not the ceiling. No, the ceiling raiser, if you want to call him the alternate guy, is what we've seen from the young rookie Easy. So I think that with the addition and his ability to kind of come in here and play with a level of veteranship, just to kind of, he has a way about him. He has very well developed skills, the way he's able to win in these situations. I think it's given you this idea that a guy that, okay, well, maybe if Sam Williams kind of shows up, we won't necessarily have to expose Ezeraku as much early on, so we can kind of learn to develop a little bit. But now you feel like, man, how do I get all these guys on the field at once? Because Ezeraku is a guy that I definitely don't want to skimp on snaps. I want to give him opportunities. But I'm also excited about Sam Williams. I'm also excited about Marshawn Nealon. I've also paid a lot of money for Fowler to be here, and that's not even including the guy whose contract we're waiting to get signed. So yeah, it's just a position that I had high hopes for, but I actually came in here and I think they've exceeded those hopes because all the guys, we need one of these guys to hit. It feels like kind of all of them are hitting in some form or fashion.
Yeah, you're still looking for that other guy to be like the bona fide guy that can play opposite of Micah Parsons and be like the DeMarcus Lawrence, right? Like be the other guy that can consistently win one-on-one matchups. My guess is long-term, it's probably going to be Donovan Ezeraku. It might not be that way as a rookie, but you do have options, right? Sam Williams maybe could be that guy in spurts. Maybe Marshawn Nealon takes that step in year 2. We should also mention James Houston, who the Cowboys signed after a week of training camp, 2 weeks of training camp. He's having a really good camp. He had a good preseason game. Do I think he ultimately makes the final roster? Probably not. But you're just getting really good depth play out of this defensive line. So, out of the edge rushers. Let me clarify that. You're getting really good depth play out of the edge rushers right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I think kind of hinting towards what you're saying, you're starting to see some of these guys. Like, I mean, I was watching tape, yesterday, and Peyton Turner was taking snaps as a defensive tackle in the goal line. Like, why?
Well, he's not going to make it as an edge. So
yeah, and also, I mean, I'm talking about with the ones, like that's not a good sign for necessarily what's happening in the interior part of the spot.
No,
so
we'll get to those guys.
Yeah, but I do think that they have kind of an embarrassment of riches there, which is why you're also seeing more 5-man surface stuff. You're seeing them kind of try to use a bunch of these guys because they all have different skill sets too. So a versatile group that you maybe can play in a couple different spots.
All right, give me another position that you think is trending in the right direction.
I think it's much to kind of talk about last year and compared to last year, the wide receiver spot is at a better position than I thought it was. I mean, again, I knew Pickens was going to be here. That's not surprising, but I think what we've seen out of Mingo, what we've seen out of how they've used Tolbert and how he's responded to that, those two things were a surprise to me and kind of eye-opening coming out to camp. And I think that it just sort of raises the floor a little bit on the wide receiver room. We'll see how that Tolbert Mingo situation kind of plays out. I mean, Tolbert Mingo situation kind of plays out, but we know that Turpin is going to have a role doing his thing and how he's responded. And we know that other spot is probably going to be occupied by Mingo, Tolbert, and then Brooks probably being kind of the last guy in the room, right? Because he's going to be a special teams guy. So, but the question has always been, how are those guys going to play? I've been really surprised with the quietly solid camp, like just a veteran camp by Mingo, which is very surprising. Hasn't had a terrible day or anything like that. So I think that room's floor being higher than I expected was quite surprising.
I've seen some beat reporters over the last 48 hours suggest that maybe the Cowboys could cut Jalen Tolbert in favor of like a Ryan Flournoy or Trayshawn Holden. And I'm not saying it's not possible, but I have a hard time believing that still, just because Tolbert can play on special teams. We saw Tolbert return a punt on Monday or on Saturday. He knows all three receiver positions, and we know that Dak likes him. Maybe he's not having a great camp, but I still think, man, as a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, he's going to have a role in this team.
He's not. I can't imagine him getting cut. I mean, he had 600 yards receiving last year, and all the things that you mentioned, right? He's got experience, and as much as you like Mingo and you want to give this guy opportunities because you traded for him, and it looks like maybe he's turning a corner a little bit. Like, you're not just eschewing a cheap contract and Tolbert for a guy that's a solid player that has a relationship with Dak. I mean, like a connection with Dak, not just a relationship. So I think that it's more just about, can we improve on Tolbert as the wide receiver 3, like by Mingo playing better and kind of taking that job. That's more what I think we're looking at, as opposed to replacing these guys on the roster. I think, Flournoy, like, probably a year away from being on the roster, and a guy that maybe is a reliable target, right?
And we should mention, like, I wouldn't be surprised if their plan is, let's have Tolbert this year, let him hit free agency. Hopefully you have Ryan Flournoy or Trayshawn Holden on the practice squad, and they kind of fill in next year as that wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. We should also mention George Pickens is a free agent. I mean, he's hinted that he wants to be back, and CeeDee Lamb's not hinted. He's coming out right and said that it's not going to be his last year in Dallas, but you never know how this year is going to go, and you never know how contract negotiations are going to go. So they're going to need more receivers. So having some guys on the practice squad that you're stashing for a year isn't the worst plan in the world.
Yeah, and especially in a world where there's tons of these guys coming out, for the wide receivers, it makes sense to kind of want to hang around in a situation for a little bit to kind of get some rapport with the guy and understand that, hey, I'm going to have opportunities if I play my cards right. And I think that's going to be the case for guys like Holden and Flournoy if they play their cards right here.
Yeah, and I even think there's some veteran guys that have chased money elsewhere that maybe regret leaving Dallas. Maybe they couldn't get as much money. Like, I'll give you an example, like Cedric Wilson, right? The Cowboys really like Cedric Wilson. He filled a really good role. He had a connection with Dak. He signed with Miami and is kind of just bounced around elsewhere. I saw him actually playing with the Saints like into the third quarter of a preseason game this weekend. And I kind of felt bad because that was a guy that, went out and signed a pretty big contract with the Dolphins, but I think he had a good role at the Cowboys. But we're getting off the topic. Let's talk about some positions, Landon, that are trending in the wrong direction coming out of the preseason. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. And for just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, maybe like the Cowboys, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. You can take a shot on an MVP. I kind of like the Joe Burrow this year. I thought he maybe should have won it last year. I think he's a good bet this year. Maybe you can go pick your Super Bowl champion. I think it's going to be one of those AFC teams this year. I'm going to go with Baltimore. We'll see. Or you could parlay your favorite division winners So visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bet now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Bets. Betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rogers have daily MLB locks and can't miss football futures. Find Locked On Bets on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. All right, let's talk about some positions that are trending in the wrong direction. What do you got?
All right, I want to be very specific here, because I think that if we said defensive tackles overall, I think I would be misspeaking, because I do think that I think the Cowboys may have found something with Perrion Winfrey. Like, it seems like we've gotten a little bit of a drumbeat going. That's a positive thing. So if we're talking about defensive tackles overall, and I also think that Solomon Thomas has looked a little bit better than what I expected him to be. So I'm happy about that side of the defensive tackle line. The other side of the defensive tackle line is rough, right? Like, I think what we've seen from Mazi is that it's still a very high level of inconsistency. It's technique based. He's still playing way too high, too often. It feels like he gets exhausted and his technique gets sloppy, and then he just gets beat up, because most of the time he's taking on double teams. And if you don't play with the right technique and you're taking on a double team, then, and you're, especially if you're too high, you're just going to be escorted out of the hole and moved around. And we saw that a little bit with him. He is, flashing. We're seeing moments where he's doing stuff. He's pushing the pocket at moments, but the problem is that between that and Jay Toya just not quite being where he needs to be for us to feel like you can rely on him, at this point.
I saw some
A few
people
weeks
on
up.
social media thinking that Jay Toya actually had a good game because he's like, oh, he had 12 plays where he was double teamed. And those plays were pretty rough where he was getting double teamed. Like, he was getting pushed out of the hole. He's a rookie. He's a 7th round pick, but I thought he really struggled.
I think if you wanted to feel like he was going to move the needle at the position in the first place, you needed him to be immediately a positive player. And you know what I'm saying? Like, especially, as things go on, you should have seen some of there. I'm not giving up on him at all. I'm just saying, like, part of what we do is come here to see where the timelines of things are, right? See where they're trending. And his just isn't like straight up. It's, a more normal curve, which is totally fine. But we needed this in order for us to feel better about the defensive tackle position. I think we've come out and shown that that's not where we are with either Mazi or with Jay Toya.
He honestly reminds me of Quinton Bohanna a little bit, who the Cowboys drafted in, was the 6th round from Kentucky, in the sense of, like, the Cowboys drafted him hoping that he could come in and stop the run right away, and he just wasn't ready for that. But now Bohanna's bounced around the league a little bit. He's actually playing pretty well for Seattle. A lot of times these guys just need 3 or 4 years to get the NFL strength. And Toya is probably going to be on the roster, but he would really benefit from like a year on the practice squad.
Yeah, I mean, he may end up playing this year, but I think he's not quite to where we need him to be a difference maker. So that's for sure.
No.
So I think that's where we are right now, is that you need a defensive tackle. Like, you kind of needed to go through training camp to confirm it, but I think we've gotten to the point where it's pretty clear you need a defensive tackle. So,
well, the other thing I want to mention, I saw a lot of people who are down on Mazi on social media, and I get it. I'm with you. But they're suggesting, like, hey, it's time to move on. It's time to cut him. Like, okay, the problem is if you cut him, you still have no defensive tackles on your roster. Like, cutting Mazi Smith does not suddenly improve your defensive tackle position. He's still your best option at one technique, unless you want to rotate Perrion Winfrey in there a little bit. So I get the frustration, but that just seems extreme to me at this point.
I mean, I think he still has some value as a rotational guy if you limit his snaps. But the problem, obviously, that's not great for a 1st round pick. But I mean, as far as whether I'd rather have him on the roster or not, just in a vacuum, I think I want him on the roster because the options outside of him are not great.
He's still, if you cut him, you just have one less defensive tackle that you feel can even play NFL regular season snaps. He's the only guy that I feel halfway decent about playing in an NFL game in 3 weeks.
And again, I think there are times when he's like, when he's got his feet underneath him and he's playing with good pad level, that it looks right and he's doing stuff. I just think that he gets overexposed very quickly. And that's a problem when you don't have enough nose tackles already. So they clearly need to kind of do something at that spot, and more than just playing some of the guys like Thomas and other these guys at nose tackle. They need to go out and get a body at this point.
And the only other position that I would say is cornerback is tricky because I feel better about Elam than I did
There's
going
so
into
many of
camp.
these guys. That's the problem, right?
Yeah,
So it's like, how do you kind of
I
measure the
feel better
people?
about Elam. Bland has
Absolutely.
had a okay camp. I don't think he's been like a superstar, but I think he's had a good camp, right?
I think it's a good camp. Yeah.
And then there's everybody else that you throw into a box, and I don't feel great. Like you could tell me any of those guys are on the roster and any of those guys are off the roster, and it probably wouldn't make a big difference. Like it's a rough spot right now.
I think I need to know where Trevon Diggs is in this situation, right? Like where the actual lineup is, because at this point, like I've obviously accepted the fact that we're going into week 1 without him, on the field.
Probably,
But
yeah.
so I'm good with the potential starting 3 corners that we've got. Anything beyond that, I'm nervous about, right?
Yeah.
Like I'll throw in Keemon Hall if you go 4 wide and Keemon Hall and Izzy are your slot guys for a couple of snaps. I mean, against the Eagles, especially where they don't have great wide receivers beyond the first 2, right? Like
Yeah, you can survive.
I can handle that, right? Like that'll be fine. But I think the problem is if you lose an outside guy or if you need another boundary guy, you're going to start running out of safe names real quick if either Elam or Bland goes down.
Yeah, and that's why we feel like they need to go out and sign a corner, whether that's Stephon Gilmore, Russell Douglas, or somebody just to make you feel good about getting through that first month of the season until Trevon Diggs can come back or until Savon Ravel, Kalen Carson. We'll see. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. He is Landon McCool. I am Marcus Mosher, and we will see you right back here on Wednesday.